Good afternoon. Icubian Organis. And before I start, let me just make sure that we are recording. Sorry, and apparently we are. Now, pardon me for being a bit breathless, but I've been meaning to do a series of debates about certain issues. And before I start, I'm going to have to take a break. I forgot one piece of material that you're all going to have to bear with me for. I'm not professional, but bear with me. There you go. Knock my hat off in the process, and we will commence. This is well, it's not live, but I'm doing it now. I think it's long overdue, and I'm doing it now. It's something that needs to be done, and as an educator, I don't know if I've told you before, accidentally found myself at a Russell Group University and I'm taking an MA. I'm not going to tell you what in. I've learned a lot and I've understood what's taking place as opposed to what they tell you is taking place. So what's this debate about? Well, the first thing that you're going to notice is the flag. And I think it's a provocative flag for some. I'm not sure it's for good reason. And I will explain. Now, if I edit this video correctly, in the beginning of this video, you have already seen. If you haven't already seen it, I will give you time to say what I'm saying is rubbish and put it at the end to prove you wrong. Doesn't matter. I'll see how it goes. I'm not that consistent with the YouTubing and the fact that I've tried to upload certain videos and it just rejects them. And of course I got fed up, so I couldn't be as consistent as I wanted to be. But anyway, the flag. And what you see here is the Confederate battle flag. And first of all, I bought it, my choice, my understanding, and I understand it. And it's my property. I could do with it as I will. If I want to set it on fire, I could. It's mine. Okay? But the reason I bought this flag was because of the nonsense I heard in the media. All left-wing, by the way. And I bought it because of the Dylan Roof shooting. There was this kid who allegedly, they've charged him for it, so I suppose using allegedly is a bit disingenuous. He was charged for murdering several people in a black people in a black church. And they went through his either his diaries or his online postings, and he was kneeling in front of a small Confederate flag. And you've had this whole backlash. Barack Obama, you know, they've moved this thing to pull down Confederate statues because they're offensive, etc. I don't agree with that. I shall explain briefly because there's more issues I would like to speak about during this video, and I want to get it within the hour or around about that time. Anyway, so I heard this nonsense argument because I've read about the Civil War, pre-Civil War, etc. I've got the book by Frederick Olmsted. Anybody who knows anything about the Civil War, Frederick Olmsted was a northerner who came pre-war to assess the viability, sustainability, and ability for the South to actually fight back, and how effective was the South as an economic model, etc., etc., etc. and all of that. And he did that assessment. I've got that book. If you don't know it, you're sitting, standing before an educator. You need it before you start talking about racism, slavery, and so forth. Okay? And the point I'm going to make is going to lead quite neatly onto this book, but you ain't going to know what it is yet. So I bought it because I was annoyed with the kind of arguments they keep putting about the Confederate flag means racist. And anybody who has a Confederate flag must be a racist. And there have been a few videos. There was a black student. You can get all this online. YouTube it, the black student who had a Confederate flag in his window. And several people who support the Confederacy. And it's not as strange as you think once you understand what happened as opposed to the winners, the North, telling you the story. Okay? And I'll get down into that. I'm going to make a series of videos about slavery, the Confederacy, and the North, etc. I love it as a historical topic. It's a bit of a pet subject for me, and pretty much by any Hollywood movie that's about the Civil War, I'd probably get it, want it, have got it. And any books that I think are good that tells the whole story of the fight, which was not to enfranchise black people. Let's get that straight, right? Let's get that straight. But be that as it may, let's just suppose I'm talking to an ignorant lefty. So I'm going to take you bit by bit and at least put a question mark in your mind that might inspire you to pick up a book and read, even if it's this fictional book. So I bought the flag and I said, screw you, Barack Obama. You're not even African American. You have no legacy of slavery because you wasn't enslaved. You have no legacy of Jim Crow, peonage, of lynching. It's not part of your history. Your dad was a Kenyan. And he was part of the administration of the British Kenyans, who would have crushed the Mau Mau. And they did crush the Mau Mau. And I didn't bring the article, but the Mau Mau, several years later, decades later, won their case in the High Courts because the British Army not only raped Kenyan women, but they castrated Kenyan males. And they had these people in their 80s standing outside the High Court, and they won their case and got some compensation. Of course, it's not going to be the compensation they will give anybody else, but the fact is that they won it. The fact that they gave them rubbish money as a compensation is neither here nor there, okay? There's institutional racism, etc. Even if they say, guilty, they still have the power to say, well, in order for us to admit to the overwhelming guilt, we will, if you don't slap us with the full weight of the law. And let's make a deal about that. And because generally people of colour don't have much power, they'll accept, in word, the victory. So I was annoyed with Barack Obama, and he pretty much set up a chain of events where people are wanting to pull down statues. And then you got this guy, an African middle class guy who goes to Oxford. Now he's not from the bush, He didn't have to. I bet he didn't have to walk miles to get water or have to milk the goats or whatever. But this guy's going to Oxford, straight to Oxford. He does not know. He has no conversation with anybody of Caribbean heritage. He's never said it, and he's upset with Cecil Rhodes, and they've got a statue in Oxford. And he wants that, the media's all around this nobody and giving him all its attention. It's a setup, Somebody sent me a WhatsApp video and they'd made an argument about, I can't remember the case, somebody who was doing bad things to black women, and there was a statue of him, and they want to rally people to get rid of the statue. I said no, because if you join that lefty bandwagon, what you're actually doing is removing away statues that you can tell your progeny, you see this man here? That these people love so much they made a statue. This man did X, Y, and Z. You can teach people about the past and about the people who herald this guy in a statue, as if he's some. Well, he wouldn't be a god, because if you believe in God, God said, create no graven images. So by that alone, you should understand that. Don't take it away. Don't be like the Taliban and blow up the Buddha statue, the 300-year-old Buddha. Why would you do that? You can't erase history unless you want to be dumb yourself. You have to know from what you came, from whence you came. If it's oppression, then it's what it was. And the people who did it, then let them stand. You didn't build it. It's not your property. And people have their property. If they want to celebrate it, let them. You teach them about it. Removing it eradicates a plank of education that your own progeny can have. So he started, I would say Barack Obama and his lefty cronies started that nonsense off. And so quite often you hear people, anybody who has a conservative voice, for argument's sake, a voice of restraint, and if it's against the left, they tend to call you names, right? It's ad hominem, and the pejorative epithet, if you're black and don't agree with the left, is that you're an Uncle Tom. Well, I actually read Uncle Tom, and I'm surprised many people haven't. I actually saw a Hollywood movie of Uncle Tom, and I'm like, the book is much better and goes into detail, as all books do. And so you could be riveted to a book and get more, and you watch the movie and it's like, why didn't you what about that part? What about this part? But Hollywood, controlled by certain sections of people, want to use that as a way of educating you with entertainment, but they erase history. Now, about this Uncle Tom issue, before I move on to greater issues, and I've not got big notes. I've just got 3 pointers I would like to cover the 3 points. But about this Uncle Tom issue, the pejorative epithet that says you're a sellout. Say you're an Uncle Tom. They need a new word. You need a new moniker. You need a new slur. You should never have used Uncle Tom in the first place. Because all you tell me is that you've never read Uncle Tom. And I'm going to show you the cover of my Uncle Tom. This is the cover of my Uncle Tom. And it's a Penguin classic, if I'm not mistaken. Actually, sorry, it's a Wordsworth classic. I actually thought it was Penguin, but no, they kind of do similar type publishings. So there's a couple of misleading things about this book in the first place. Now, Uncle Tom was written by Harriet Beecher Stowe. She was a white woman, and she was an abolitionist. And her brother was an ardent abolitionist, and John Brown, they didn't get him, when they got John Brown and hung John Brown for trying to evoke a slave rebellion, he wasn't part of that, but he did get some carbines, and he hid them in crates. And in the crates there were marked Bibles. But actually there were carbines for those who wanted to fight. This is before the Civil War, the rebellion, and they wanted to arm slaves to have this fight. And the carbines were, because the crates were called Bibles, and when they opened it up they were guns, they were called, the guns were called Beecher's, Harriet Beecher Stowe's brother, Beecher's Bibles. They're not Bibles. Beecher's Bibles were a reference to the carbines. Carbines as opposed to rifles. Rifles are what snipers use, etc. Carbines are what the cavalry use, and they'd have their long gun, not as long as a rifle, but they were pretty handy. Anyway, right. So he had a bunch of carbines. So she wasn't on her own. She had family that were abolitionists. And I'm going to get into the detail of abolitionists and the types of abolitionists there were. However, when you look at the cover, you see an old man. He's in tatty clothes. He's got grey hair. Obviously, the artist hadn't read the book either. Most people don't read the book. They're like hearsay. I hear tell, I hear say, and they act like they're scientific with it. And they colour it with loads of nonsense. And basically it comes down to, I just don't like white people. You know what I mean? That's what they say, right? And I'm against this race baiting, whether it comes from white people or black people, right? It's not real, it's not true, and it's not a full analysis of our history. So they're giving you the impression that this guy, Uncle Tom, was old. And I think most people, if you ask them, was he an old man? Ask any black kid who listens to these Pan-Africanists, they would probably tell you, yeah, all man. No, he wasn't. He was young. I would argue that he was probably in his early 30s. And a strong, fit man. So, first and foremost, he's not old. But if you've ever seen that Walt Disney classic, I forget what it's called now, but they got Uncle Remus in there. And Uncle Remus is a character, it's called? Song of the South. And we've all seen it, zippity-doo-dah, zippity-yay, my oh my, what a wonderful day. And the birds are, playing to you. Anyway, right? People think that's Uncle Tom. That's not Uncle Tom. That's Uncle Remus. Has nothing to do with this story. So, secondly, if you don't like reading, you can get a Leibovitz recording, and I just checked it again recently. You can go online, on YouTube, and it will read to you the entire book. You could read along with it, which could be fun, because there's a vernacular in here you might not handle. 19th century, remember. And I will say, as far as the book is concerned, there are two parts in this book that, if you read it, you will be very close to tears. Some of you will be crying. And some of you hard guys are going to feel away, right? You will feel away, right? But I can tell you, I mapped out every example. In fact, I wrote an essay. And I had a black lecturer. And he was kind of like bearing on the concept that Uncle Tom is a right pejorative epithet. And I was like, no, it ain't. I'm telling you it ain't. But he's the power. So I wrote my essay, and I went through the book again. At every instance, Uncle Tom had an opportunity to either murder somebody because the opportunity is there, or to flee because the opportunity was there. And he didn't do it. And he didn't do it because that's not how it goes. That's not how the story goes. Right? And I can only think somebody thinks there was opportunities for X, Y, and Z, and he didn't do it because he loved his master so much. I think he respected his master because they respected him. I'm trying not to tell you what the end of the story is, but I think the end of the story is the second part that will probably have you in tears. If you have not read it, it's worth reading. And Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote this book because she had first eyewitnesses and people told her, etc. Based on real characters, but she's fictionalized it. It won't be the first time that's happened. So it is a fiction book. She wrote a later one named Drum, but be that as it may. So when people keep calling sellouts, traders, COINTELPRO, Uncle Tom's, they're not. They're worse. Not worse. They don't have the right to be labelled with a hero, because that's what he is, a true hero. Now you might say, look at this N-word with the Confederate flag, and we all know. Read it. And listen to the rest of this broadcast. And whenever you see this broadcast, and you see me addressing slavery, read it. Look at it. And when I give you books to look at and read them. Okay? I demand that you do that rather than you run around, call an audience in front of your best white enemies and they embarrass you by pulling out the book and showing you that you didn't read it. I do that. That's what I do. Okay? So, the Confederate flag is the battle flag, and they changed the flag And let's stop, pull it back. I think I've said this before. If you're from Jamaica, name me the black Jamaican that designed the flag. Because if you notice, the Jamaican flag has got the Scottish saltire in it. That has got the Scottish saltire in it, right? And there are a few flags with a Scottish saltire in it. Show me, you didn't design the flag. You don't own the flag. And if you wasn't around the table about the colours and what, shut up. It's bigger than you. You don't understand, okay? To me, badges. We don't want no stinking badges. And those of you who have seen The Treasure of the Sierra Madre will know what I'm talking about with that quote. But, you know, some people live and die for a piece of cloth, right? Piece of cotton. All right. So, I think I've addressed the flag. And before you go in and not understand, there are many people that want to say that blacks were not fighting in the Confederate Army. This is not true. Although officially they were not enlisted as a fighting force, where Frederick Douglass was lobbying Abraham Lincoln, the racist, to recruit black people into the army, the Northern Army. And they came into the fray, the blacks, the African Americans came into the fray on the northern side just after Gettysburg. That's when you got blacks in the Northern Army. And let's not pretend. If you've ever seen Glory, it's a film concerning the 52nd Massachusetts, who went to attack Fort Wagner. They were not paid the same money. They were disrespected then. And let's not pretend World War I and World War II, the United States didn't have a segregated army. I'm just saying, right? Before you start running your mouth, right? About what you don't know. But you're learning a lot now, okay? You may want to switch off by now, but there's more, much more. So, Frederick Douglass, one of his lines, he says, look, the Confederacy, he's telling this to Lincoln, the Confederacy's got black men. And they're not just teamsters and grave diggers. They've got bullets in their pockets. You know, they're fighting. They're fighting men, they're armed. And they were. First Bull Run. Many a black man served in that win for the Confederacy. General Jackson had blacks in his brigades. And what is not well known, this may shock you, but until you read, and don't believe Hollywood, just read, find the books. Nathan Bedford Forrest, that man they said formed the Ku Klux Klan, which he didn't, but he was a Grand Wizard for a period and renounced it, or left it in 1868. There are reasons for why somebody of white hue would have done that, joined it or sought to enfranchise the poor whites, because they didn't have a voice in the fight in the first place. Poor whites didn't have a fight in the first place. They were just conscripted to fight. And there's a new movie. It's not new now, but I'm trying to. Matthew McConaughey starred in a movie recently about the Civil War, where there was a band of Confederates and African slaves who refused to fight for the Confederacy, and actually were fighting the Confederacy in the county of Jones, right, Mississippi. It was not for poor people, for poor farmers, subsistence farmers. They didn't want that. If you're doing your own farming, if you've seen the Shenandoah, then you would understand when war starts, you may have your own little business. But the big boys who want the war, who thought it was going to be over, you know, the Kellogg Browns and Ruth and the Carlisle group, they get paid very, you know, handsomely, you know. But when the war was gone beyond, now you have to provide for your war. That's when they kind of like turned on the people and started to take their own livestock to fight the Confederacy. And then they came out with the, if you have 25 slaves, you can come out of the army and go tend about your slaves and your plantation. Well, that annoyed quite a few Confederates because there they are, the grunt, the foot soldiers, and they ain't got a slave. They couldn't afford one. And these guys were, despite allegedly they say was about, it wasn't. It was about liberty. Let's be honest about that. Some will say, well, hang on a minute. Liberty to do what? To make the money you want to make? Well, what were they making the money off? The backs of slavery. That might be so. It was a dying institution, that's a fact. And it was just the strong boy holdouts. The types of, like Wade Hampton, he had a big estate, he was a general. But not everybody's the same, and many generals in the north had slaves too, right? I'm saying it's much more complex than them and us, black and white. I'm just telling you. Indians had slaves and plantations. You know, those Indians. General Stan Watty, he served with the Confederacy. He was an Indian, full blown. Well, no, he wasn't. He was I think he was. He was an Indian chief anyway, right? And he had a plantation. He served and fought in the west of the theatre. In fact, General Stan Watty, the Indian, the Native American, was the last general to surrender. So all when April comes and Appomattox is signed, in the west, they're still fighting. They ain't here till yet. They haven't heard word yet. So they're still fighting, and Watty's doing his thing. So anyway, that kind of like lets you know I know a little bit about what I know a little bit about. You may say, well, why do you like this flag? I didn't say I like it. I said it's my property. And at the end of the day, when, just to prove that this has never been the problem, and the flag that you see now, the Star-Spangled Banner, I think they call it Old Glory, that has been the problem. That's been the problem. Because although the War of the Revolution against the English, black people fought on both sides, and in the War of the Civil War, the war between the states, black people fought on both sides, it was the Star-Spangled Banner in which the segregated army was. The disrespect. Yeah, you can wear the blue, but you get less paid. The less we recognise you as a human being. First they want them to be like Teamsters and just dig ditches and shit. These guys wanted to fight, and when they did, yeah, they were cannon fodder, right? For the most part, but fought bravely. So, please read Uncle Tom. There's a couple of other stories as well, and there's lots of stuff to do with lynchings and books. We can go into that at a later date. But cease and desist with using the term Uncle Tom unless you've read it, not watched the movie. I've seen the movie, whatever. This is where it is. And there's something in this book you really need to find. That will give you a clue as to maybe why his name has become a pejorative epithet. But you've got to read it to see it, right? So I know something you don't know. And when you do read it, you're going to say, I got him. This guy's light years ahead. Could be, I don't know. So, I'm inspired to do this video, not because of the slave issue, because I would have dealt with it the way in which I wanted to. But I was just watching the feedback of a debate that took place fairly recently in Canada. And it's a yearly event as far as I understand. It's called the Munk debate, the M-U-N-K debate. And I think basically two factions, opposing views, have a civilized debate. The history of, I don't know. You'd have to look that up yourself. Who's been on the Munk debate before? I don't know. You'd have to look that up yourself. I just came into it because there is a clinical psychologist I've been following for some time on YouTube, inspirational, and I found that much of the work that I do, we're on the same team. He's a white guy. His name is Jordan Peterson. And he's a professor. And He's top boy. He's a sensation on YouTube. He's generated loads of money through his Patreons and all the rest of it. He is the #1 professor right now. He tears up the left, the Marxist, you know, the neo-Marxist. They really have no argument. I pretty much do it myself anyway. But it was good to see that there was a professor. I was shocked. Because I thought all these professors are taking over all the universities, and they're not teaching, they're indoctrinating. And it's ridiculous. It's really, really, really bad. And considering 150 students, I think it's this year, have committed suicide in England, that's not to say, or to mention those who have been mentally disturbed. I know somebody close to me who was going to university, a very intelligent young man, but he was raised with right and wrong, and good and bad, up and down, black and white. When you get to the Marxists, they use psychological warfare tactics, low level, to, when you question them on the nonsense that they put forward in their lectures, they use psychological methods to get the whole student body to go against you and ostracize you. And if you're young, it can be very, very tough and mentally challenging, because all that you've grown up to know to be right and correct, they are doing the actual opposite. And in another one of my essays, I actually quoted from the Communist Manifesto. This is what I just don't understand, where the Marxists are coming from. The depths of Satan's backside, as far as I am concerned. But it quite clearly says, we understand, in a nutshell, we understand Christianity, we understand the Reformation, we understand the Enlightenment, we don't like it, and we want to overturn all the goodness in society and, quote, abolish morality. Now, you could say, oh, no, don't say, read, okay? Pick up a book and read, or follow me and learn. You know, I'm not your enemy, I'm going to enlighten you myself. So, the Munk debate takes place. Jordan Peterson is on the platform. What's his name? Stephen Fry is supposedly on Jordan Peterson's side. And on the left you've got Michelle, whatever her name is, some Jewish girl. And you've got Michael Eric Dyson. Stephen Fry's Jewish as well. So, and Jordan Peterson's Canadian, Michael Eric Dyson is an African American. Now, I've heard Michael Eric Dyson debate before, and I think he's a blowhard. He's an academic, very intelligent, he's verbose, and a show-off with it. Of course, when lefties are doing what they're doing, they support feminism and that. All of this stuff that the feminists go for, when they've got somebody like Michael Eric Dyson on their side, because he's a heavyweight lefty intellectual, you know, all the feminism goes out the window for them because they just want to have sex. He's a rock star, you know, and that's it. And the left, that's what they do, right? So anyway, he's there. You could say that's ad hominem, a bit of juice. Well, if Michael Eric Dyson, when he debates and doesn't understand the forum of the debate, or he does, but he wants to blur the lines and be personal, then he asks for it. Do you know what I mean? He's out there. We all know what the argument is. So I look at the debate, and I'm thinking, Stephen Fry, he's on the same side of Jordan Peterson. Because I'm thinking, Stephen Fry is a lefty, isn't he? And I'm like, here we go again. Jordan Peterson debating, he on his own, and everybody else. But the illusion is, it's 2-1-2, right? The illusion is it's 2-1-2. Whereas, in reality, it's 3-1. That's the first thing I've noticed. The female of the group has really got nothing to say. Nothing significant. And she starts off with her legs crossed. And when she's under pressure, her legs come like that. And I'm like, are you trying to get people off their spot? The Munk debate, Jordan Peterson, or you could just say Jordan Peterson versus Michael Eric Dyson. You'll find the whole show. She starts off with her legs crossed, then they part a bit. The psychology of a hussy, right? And to be honest, she's not a bad looking chick. I'm not saying she's not a bad looking chick. She's not a bad looking chick. She just chats the proverbial bullshit and has nothing to say. Why would she? She's riding off the coattails of people that have actually carved out something for themselves and people would actually pay to hear, right? As for, I'm going in terms of the impact and what they said the least, and I'm addressing them first. I didn't really get anything from her. You know, apart from the fact that she's a Jewish female and might be considered a bit of totty, that she didn't have anything of value to add, right? Then Stephen Fry is supposed to be defending, the debate was about political correctness. I think, has it gone too far? Is it a force for good? Something like that. Pardon me. I'm kind of winging it. I should have really written down exactly what I was going to say. So please forgive the pauses for thought in this video. So Stephen Fry really didn't have much to say. I didn't think he would. But he made one point, which was quite true. And it was a backhanded warning to his own lefties. Get your house in order, basically. That was the sum total of what he did. His point was this. With the recent victory for Trump and Brexit, this is not so much a victory for the right. It's got nothing to do with the right anyway. It's more a failure of the left. And in what he's saying, he's pretty much talking about the kind of lefty tyranny that we have now at university campuses with safe spaces and no platforming. I mean, university used to, at before time, a robust place where different views can be put forward and you'd argue it. You have to reason you have to win your argument. You know what I mean? You have to present a good argument, but no. If the left don't like what you say, they call you names. And we're sick of political correct culture. I'm a man of colour. My colour and the history of my colour at the hands of, let's just say, white people, right? Let's just say white people. It's written, it's undeniable, there's videos, it's true. It's true, right? And the resources to prove the truth and it's just there. It's not something that you can readily deny. But if you want to deny it, fine. I am not going to say no platform that person. The bigger the person who says it's not true, the better. You present your argument, we'll have a debate about it. I will never no platform you. If you've got a fan base and we've got TV cameras or whatever, let's have it. The people who say what you say is offensive are using the terms offence to shut you up. A microaggression is to shut you up, and I'm sick of that, you know, microaggressions and so forth. So his offering was basically to lambast the left, and he says we. So I'm like, well, you should really cross the other side. I think he more or less said, I'm not quite sure why I'm over here in the first place. So to his credit, fair enough. I mean, in England, they go on like this guy, you know, the best brain in the world. He's an academic, I suppose, an intellectual. I'm not into praising people if I don't hear your work. And the left are wrong, keep going wrong, and they up themselves, and they pretty much put their hand over the ears, la 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 la, don't want to hear you, and they look for authority to say, tell him, and lock him up. And that's where we are. We're in a kind of pseudo-tyranny in universities and anywhere else. I mean, it is that ridiculous that you can quote something from history and somebody doesn't like it. They don't say, well, what you're saying is not true because X, Y, and Z. They call you names. A recent event happened where the lefty, former mayor, Ken Livingstone, resigned from the Labour Party because he mentioned something that was true. And I think it pertains to being Hitler helped the Zionist or was a Zionist, and that got Jews screaming, crying and wailing and oy veying that how offensive it was. And he should, shouldn't Jeremy Corbyn should kick him out and all, but it's true. In fact, I will say Hitler was a Zionist. And they actually minted a coin. One side was a swastika, the Star of Remphan, or the Magen David, or the Star of David, whichever your historical knowledge was on the other side. Right? They minted a coin, both sides. And this is to do with the Havara Agreement, the Transfer Agreement. There is a book called The Transfer Agreement by Edwin Black, who's Jewish. There is another one called by Professor Lenny Brenner. I think it's called something like Zionism in the Age, Hitler and Zionism in the Age of the Dictators. Just Lenny Brenner, Amazon Lenny Brenner, and you'll see the titles. He's written a book on the Havara Agreement as well, and the deal between Hitler and so forth. So the point is, what he said was uncomfortable for some people. They didn't like it, and they bully people and call you anti-Semite, etc., even though they're not Semitic. Different argument. It's not really about that. This is to do with the debate. So then you've got Stephen Fry. That was, for me, the only salient thing you can take from his contribution was really to kind of lambast the left for going as far as they have and where they are right now. And the reason why he's doing it is not for anything else. He realises you're gone too far, and all you've done is led a backlash. It's not just the right. I was a socialist for years, but I began to realise that this socialism is not socialism, it's Marxism. And Marxism is communism. Communism is totalitarian, it's Talmudiism. It truly is. If you do your research, it is. That's not me. And I wrote an essay recently, and it passed. I'm happy that that's the case. And I broke it down. There was socialism written. Charles Fournier. You had Victor Prosper, Considerant, and our own, I say our own, the Welshman Robert Owen, who didn't just write about it or speak about it, he actually did it, he created it. We saw it. He's accredited as creating the first co-op, the first nursery. This is the man who had factories and made money. And he wrote about it and said, look at my methods. Come one, come all. Read about it. Come see. So he set up his community in Lanark, Scotland, and in New Hampshire, in America. Is it New Hampshire? Whoops. Yeah, don't quote me. It's New something, and it may come to me in America. The point being, socialism was there. At no time did it say we want to turn Christianity upside down, make whores of women, or bad morality. None of those guys I mentioned, Fournier, Considerant, and Owen, that wasn't their issue. In fact, they actually, at least Owen said, we want to bring some morals and to make people upstanding citizens and better parents. Because you have to understand, the Industrial Revolution, it was a boon for producers and creators. But the working class, they lived in abject squalor, and they worked in highly hazardous places. For argument's sake, we've all heard of Alice in Wonderland and the Mad Hatter. Well, the reason the Mad Hatter was mad because he was a milliner, man who makes hats. And most of these hats, top hats and that, were made from felt. Well, the process to making a felt hat was using the second most poisonous element on the planet called mercury. It's a neurotoxin. In those small spaces and confined factories. If you work with that product for any length of time, you go loony. Hence the Mad Hatter. So there were lots of unsafe places for people to work in. Okay, black lung if you're working in the mining industry, the shipping, whatever it was a boom. And furthermore, it was the only game in town. The Industrial Revolution occurred all over Europe. There was no other example. There was no structured schooling system in 1869. It is in 1870 they got the first Education Act, where they're going to give people structured education. And that wasn't perfect. They kept improving it. But you couldn't get a better one in Germany or Italy. Why? Because Germany as a country didn't exist, and neither did Italy. You had to wait another year, 1871, before those two countries. So when you've got Karl Marx running his mouth up about how bad the system is, compared to what? Furthermore, his pal, it was Marx and Engels. Engels had a factory. He didn't treat people respectfully. He actually used to go to Owen's lectures and listen to socialism. So the Communist Manifesto, it's not original. What's original about it? It's this dark undertone of destroying society and turning it upside down, in the belief that, well, he actually thinks that people are children because they're profit. They're nothing. Nobody loves each other. A man and a woman don't fall in love. They don't love their children. It's just to send them up the chimney to make money. Everything revolves around that. Yet he's got nothing to do with his fellow brethren, the banking class. He's got nothing to say about that. And he's, as I quoted in my essay, huge tracks of racism, nasty, dirty, filthy, anti-black sentiments coming out of his mouth. And they can't deny that. This man was not about anything apart from turning things upside down. And if you're neo-Marxist, that's where your philosophy comes from. Destruction of a Christian society. And do Jews like Jesus Christ? No. And so the new society, as it was a brand new society. It wasn't a brand new country, but the Industrial Revolution is new. Steam power, hydraulics, gas, electricity. You got new petrol even comes into the play at some point. I mean, you've got all of these technologies going on, and it's just a boon for creators. They didn't set up a system to hold anybody down, but they did set up a system and use people to stand up on. And some of those people are black people, okay? Slavery was what it was. But you have to put it in for real context. As slavery went throughout the centuries, treatment of slaves bettered, believe it or not. Why would you have a fully productive family on your farm? Why would you beat that to death and lose X amount of bales of cotton? For what? A hissy fit? For what? You had to... A slave, if you were a plantation owner, you had to have the kind of national health, because if Miss What's-her-name slave is sick, someone's got to look after her. You call the doctor. If What's-her-name's child has sprained his foot, you can't say, oh, nigger, go look after your own. That's not going to make her work. She wants to be loyal to a slave owner. So let's be honest, this idea that all slave owners were wicked is nonsense. We will get into that, so let me leave that beside. So Stephen Fry, that was his contribution. And then we've got Dr. Eric Dyson, Professor Eric Dyson. As I said today, I was listening to somebody giving a review, a white guy giving a review. He called him a moron. And I said, no, he's not a moron. You can call him many things, but you can't call this man a moron. He's not a moron. He's an academic, very intellectual, and very verbose. This guy will not answer a simple question. He wants to show you how erudite he is. in the answer. And but he stands for the left, and it's a misguided thought. And he's a huckster. He's a race baiter of the highest order. He intellectualizes it, the race baiting. Of course, he's not going to call it race baiting, but he's a race baiter. And in the debate, he took it personal, basically he actually called Dr. Peterson your angry white man. I think he might have added something to that, which was, well, Peterson wasn't angry. Peterson was always dealing with the issue, and Dr. Peterson will hear what you say, which is unfortunate when you listen to a lot of black people. You talk to them, I've spoken to them on these community radio stations. I think they're all COINTELPRO or whatever. They never listen to it. They're responding, but they haven't heard what you said. They think they heard what you said. And just this Sunday, I tried to phone in. I phoned in on Galaxy Radio. That's down South London. And the host of that, the CEO, if you can call him that, of that radio station, was doing his phone-in show on a Sunday. A disgrace it is. So I phoned in because somebody said something about the police, and I said, well, look, it's not all police. And I refute this idea, because they were talking about deaths in police custody. And, I went through all the, bearing in mind, all deaths in police custody, tragic, shouldn't happen, X, Y, Z. But I said, pretty much the same argument I would use for the Black Lives Matter, police are killing our boys on the street. Actually, black people, black men are killing each other more than any death in custody. Now, at that point, for the second time or third time, he's interrupted me. And he said, oh, I have to disagree. So I'm like, on what point? But I agree with the first part, but the second part. So I know he's pretending to black people kill more. Black men have killed. I have to disagree. On what point? Look, I don't have no time for this. And he puts the phone down on me. That's as much as you will get from these ignorant people. I mean, they had a saying in World War I, lions led by donkeys. This guy has got no qualifications whatsoever. If you asked him to read a text, he would struggle. I've told you this before. He'd be looking at it going like, words. But they talk a lot. And they're like professional race baiters, Race baiting all the time. And I actually put it on their doorstep. These black guys, flown in from Jamaica, running their mouth up, week in, week out. That's the reason why Stephen Lawrence is dead. Because the people that give them the power to do this go to the ignorant whites, and there's plenty of them, and they say, listen to how your people around you sound. And of course, ignorants want to take revenge. As soon as they see a black boy, they, right, we'll give you some. Calling us savages and barbarians, I'll teach you. That could have been anybody. But that's what the radio does. And it's well known, right? But these ignorant they get paid every month. What do they care, right? So he's race baiting. He's brought up Peterson says that. Okay, let's just suppose I've got white privilege. What part of me, how much of me was privilege? 75%? 50%? 10%? 5%? How are you going to go about dealing with this issue? Should I, am I supposed to contribute, what did you say? A part of my wages or something to that effect. And, Michael Eric Dyson, trying to be funny, he said something like, that'll be a great start, or something to that effect. And what I find annoying about the likes of Michael Eric Dyson, as much as the Willie Lynch letter is a hoax, by the way, Professor Manuel Ampim has exposed it, and there are several books that expose it to be the hoax. But what we do know that there were quadroons, considered, and there were mulattoes and so forth, and some people were more privileged than others. Just because somebody's privileged doesn't mean they ask for that privilege. It can be bestowed upon you. It's a bit like somebody grows up and they happen to be rich, and they've been given a house and a car. Can you blame them for what they are? They are what they are, and they've been given, like every parent, the best advantage that parent can give them. They were not the creators of that wealth, for argument's sake. Neither should they apologize for it. But being just and human and understanding, we all start from somewhere. And the United Kingdom, as it is, started somewhere. And a new country was born in the Industrial Revolution. It was new, the only game in town. Germany wasn't even born. France had just had a revolution during this Industrial Revolution. It hadn't quite understood its identity yet. Do you understand? Italy wasn't born. I mean, where else are you going to go? Where can a Marxist, where could Karl Marx have gone to say, well, compared to this society, that's crap. This is injustice. How so? How so? You've got no comparison. You're just a bitch on the sidelines, and at the end of the day, nobody took you serious in your day. In fact, what they've had to do, yes, it's a segue, but I'll get back to it. They've gone over Highgate Park where this guy's buried. It was like nobody cared about where he was. They would have built, the new Marxists built a big, huge mausoleum. This is the thing about statues, let them do it. But for years, it was just overgrown. Nobody cared about him, because he wasn't that important in the first place. His philosophy did not get put into action until the Bolshevik Revolution, and we all know what happened. Millions died. Without capitalism, there can be no communism. And there was a slight window during the Industrial Revolution when there was capitalism. But we don't live in a capitalist society right now. We live in a kleptocracy that allows a few plutocrats to give you the impression that you live in a capitalist society. Having said that, you're a capitalist. I'm a capitalist. Why is that? Because when you went to school and you had the egg and spoon race, you wanted to win. You didn't tie for second or tie for last. Let's all run in together. You wanted to be the best that you can be and reap the rewards for being the best that you can be. When you had your maths exam, you wanted to do the best that you can be because you knew what you would get. You would get a reward from your parents, maybe a hug, maybe a kiss, maybe an extra bit of pocket money for making an effort. You go to university for what? To get a better job. You all want to improve upon yourselves what God has bestowed upon you. That's capitalizing on your very essence. This idea that, oh, well, he's 6'5", let's chop his legs off so he's the same height as me, that doesn't work, and it's not true. And God didn't create us that way. So, you have to be a believer in the Creator. And the Marxists don't, because there's sense in the Creator. There is nonsense without one. And, the neo-Marxists and the social constructionists who say there are no absolutes, you have to say to yourself, well, is that absolutely true? Circular reasoning, be that as it may. So, he's taking pot shots at Jordan Peterson, and he's gone into this race diatribe. And it's really nothing to do with the actual debate of what the question's about. Is it a force for good? Political correctness. Has it gone too far? And if it has, show us where and what we can do about it. And Jordan Peterson keeps repeating that, which he quite clearly, speaking the truth, he hadn't got an answer to. Because they don't want to answer it. By answering it, then they have to identify themselves as being wrong. And it opens the whole gate to the full philosophy. So what they do is act like they didn't hear it, and get the ignorance to, clap and stamp about a stupid joke, which actually means little or nothing. So I didn't time my conversation with you. I really should have been a bit more organised, but I think I took a break from writing an essay. Well, I'm about to write another essay. and practicing my chess game. And I thought, look, I've just been reminded to have this conversation about Jordan Peterson. And Jordan Peterson came to fame pretty much, I found him by accident, cruising through the internet. And what it was, I was watching a few of his debates where he's actually debating students. Now, in Canada, they're so lefty, it's unbelievable. I mean, you can't stand up, they're so left. But we're bringing into law a bill called Bill C-16, which was compelling people to use words, pronouns